What is plywood? Plywood, according to Webster, is a type of strong, thin wooden board consisting of 2 or more layers glued and pressed together with the direction of the grain alternating. Now, that's one of the main things that makes plywood so strong is, you see this piece, the grain is running this way. The ply on the back, generally the grain is running this way, but the grain, the ply in the middle, this is street ply plywood, that grain will be running this way. So you don't have to, if you're working with plywood, you don't have to necessarily rotate layers to get the strongest bond between opposite grains. I could take every piece and stack it up just like this and it would be just as strong because we have that alternate layer in the middle of it. Plywood is used instead of plain wood because of its resistance to cracking, shrinkage, splitting, and twisting and warping, and its general high degree of strength. So there's several kinds of plywood, and I won't make this too long. There's softwood plywood, which is normally cedar, Douglas fir, spruce, pine, fir, which is sometimes called spruce, pine, fir, or SPF. You got hardwood plywoods, and they're typically birch, oak, and maple are the most common. Tropical plywood, which can be any kind of Asian species of wood, and then only the very outer face, and sometimes only one face. It'll have a good side and a bad side. So they'll take that exotic Asian veneer and put them in, and that's called tropical plywood. Then you have special purpose kinds of plywood, like aircraft plywood, which is light and strong, it's typically birch, mahogany, and basswood. So if you get any of those, that's really, really nice plywood. And normally the aircraft plywood is thinner sheets. So if you can find some of that in a hobby store somewhere, you need to buy a supply of it. You got decorative plywoods or overlay plywoods, which have ash, oak, red birch, maple mahogany, Philippine mahogany, Luan, I believe that might be Luan. Some of the cores of these pieces is Luan, but it's the stuff you see in really cheap home doors, the wood that's colored about like this. Flexible plywood and marine plywood. You got fire retardant, moisture resistant, all that. But it's core material with decorative veneers put on the faces. All right, some of the famous plywood turners. I didn't find many. I found some really ugly plywood pieces on YouTube. I mean, these things were like socks on a rooster. They're just bad. But the guy was real proud of them, so I guess it's all right. But the 3 most famous that I've heard of are Bob Stocksdale, and I've seen one of his plywood bowls in person. And it's simple. It's amazing piece of turning. Rudy Osolnik, the famous candlestick guy, well, he did some beautiful plywood bowls as well. Not many, but he did some. Now the guy that does the most, that uses plywood all the time, is Stephen Gleasner. He's a current modern turner. And you'll see Stephen sometimes just turns plies or plywood, sometimes he does segmented pieces, but he always uses the bright colored dyes and stains and then a bright, hard, shiny finish on them. Just beautiful pieces. So if you ever get a chance to look at Gleasner's work, you'll really be impressed with what you can do with plywood. So he would look at mine and say, "You've been on YouTube, haven't you?" And then, anybody here when David Engdahl, the plywood sculptor, came to our club many, many years ago? Anybody besides me? You remember him? Dave Engdahl was an architect with my company, he retired, and he does plywood sculptures only out of plywood. He uses no other materials. He just doesn't turn it. One other problem with plywood is the splinters. There are splinters in this stuff everywhere, especially when you cut it with your bandsaw. With the blade upside down? I'm not kidding, I didn't cut these. I got these, right here. Can you see that fuzz, that ragged edge right there? And if you leave that on, right here it's not bad because it's long and fuzzy, but right there, those are really sharp, and those will stick in your skin and you won't feel them for a couple of days. And then it's sort of too late. So another reason that I wear gloves with this stuff. And there's a lot of chemicals in plywood, the glues, some of the glues, especially if you use pressure-treated plywood or rain-grade plywood.
Even the regular glues, urea formaldehyde. So.
Yeah, the stuff they make it with. So the breathing protection is even more important. One of the characteristics of plywood is it'll dull your tools in no time. It took the teeth off that bandsaw blade, even upside down. It knocked off half the teeth. A bowl gouge. I didn't bring all that I have, but I think I brought enough to turn a piece. But it will dull a bowl gouge. Your skew, none of those things will last very long at all. So you need to be close to your sharpener at all times turning the blade.
Is that because of the glue?
It's the glues. Now, some of the wood has minerals in it, like in the exotics and things. Sometimes it's the minerals, but it's primarily the glues they use. And you would think, I had a guy ask me in the office today, well, doesn't the glue just gum up your tools? No, it's a special kind of glue that's not, it's not rubbery or soft like the PVA glue is.
Right. Urea formaldehyde, it dries rock hard. That's why they use it for thin layer lamination, because there's no creep. Once it's set, it's there, and you're supposed to sand off the edges before you join it, because it'll just tear it up, and that's what they use between the plies.
Right. So you can orient the grain many different ways. So these were scraps I got from Dave Engdahl. These are in a sculpture somewhere. I guarantee you that sculpture's probably sold for $15,000 or more. But I got the scraps, so I'm hoping. But you can take these and choose them for color variation from front and back, and you have to figure out which way they go. The grain, coarse grain versus fine grain, you can see that's a pretty coarse grain on the top. So there's all kinds of choices you can make. You can buy the aircraft grade plywood if you want a smooth, bright, hard, thin surface. And I'll show you a couple of options here, and we'll turn these and see what they made, because I rotated grain in some and I flipped boards in some, and I'm not sure what they're going to do. So we'll take a look at that and see. Plywood is hard to turn thin because it is brittle. The glue joints, while they're really strong, when they get really thin, they get brittle. So if you decide you want to turn something thin with plywood, use plenty of liquid or thin CA glue and soak it in. I'll show you that on some of this colored plywood. I make a bottle stopper first. You can also put natural solid woods in these things in layers if you want. There's all kinds of woods you can combine. They'll all glue together, they'll all stick, so it won't make any difference. Finishes, I always use sanding sealer, which is mixed up with cellulose sanding sealer, 1/3, 50%, and 50% lacquer thinner. So what this does is seals the pores, and sometimes it's good enough for the finish. I don't do anything on top of it. You can use all your other finishes. You can use stains and dyes. I'm not going to talk about how to stain and dye. It's a whole different story. It's highly complicated to stain plywood and get it to turn out even because of the edges and the glues and the core materials. And you can do pyrography if you want. So, you can go out to Home Depot. That's where Dave Engdahl buys all of his plywood for his professional sculptures. He buys at Home Depot and just picks through the rack and picks the pieces he likes. Sandy, S-A-N-D-E, is one of his favorite plywoods now. And sometimes you can find Sandy at a pretty good price. Some of these are probably Sandy, but I didn't ask which ones. So you can make your own, like I did these. So what I did is for this one, I took, all this is Dave Engdahl plywood, and he had some round pieces, I put them in the middle, and then I took a regular piece of Luan plywood, another round piece, Luan, round piece, Luan, and just stacked them up with, in this case, alternating the front grain and back grain just to see what difference that will make. But all of the grain is lined up the same way. I don't know if that'll make a difference on the edge or not, so we'll find out. Then I put it on my bandsaw and cut it round because I don't want to take the time to turn all those sharp corners off and they'll chip and fly and all that stuff. So take the time to put it on your bandsaw, and hopefully a brand new used Delta 10-inch bandsaw will do a great job with these. So I made another blank where I rotated them 45 degrees between each layer. And all of the faces are oriented the same direction. So each one of these, I've got that same face, and on the back face is the lighter colored plywood, back face up. So we'll see what difference that makes if we have time. And then this one is just a stack of plywood with every grain rotated 90 degrees, and again cut on the bandsaw. I didn't alternate the faces, they're all exactly the same. I didn't make any with real wood in it. I didn't make any with stained wood or anything like that. I made my own blank for a bottle stopper. This is pure 1/4-inch Luan plywood, nothing special about it. Glued the layers together with PVA glue, Elmer's glue, and then cut it the right size. Ed talked about creep, that's creep. That's very frustrating when you glue these layers together and you know how the pieces slide. You put them down, you got them perfect, put tape around them, put a wood block on it or clamp it, and you come back in an hour and it looks like that. So fortunately, I don't need that much wood, but this is what that wood glue will do, is creep on you. I called it a creep, or better. So, or you can go buy color ply. Color ply, diamond ply, there are several names for this stuff. This is pre-dyed, pre-colored. You can get it in multicolors, you can get it in 2 colors. This one makes a really nice color, and I've got another one at home that's green and yellow, made just beautiful Christmas bottle stoppers. So we're going to turn one of these first because it'll be quicker. The thing you have to remember about these plies, it doesn't have an interface, an outer face, and a stronger core. It's just layer after layer after layer of the colored ply glued up one at a time. This wood is very soft. When you start turning it, you can either get grain tear out or soft and spongy. So I always harden it up with super glue because I don't have to put any color to it. This stuff will just be way too soft if you don't do that to it. So we'll try that real quick.
You put super glue on before you turn it or after?
No, after I get it close to shape,
Yeah.
I really slow down on my cuts. I try to get to the skew and get as fine a finish as I can. And then when I want to make my final cuts, I'll soak that in with thin CA glue and then cut through the glue. And then put another coat, and sometimes the super glue is the final finish. Now, I don't have the fine grit sandpaper to do a super glue finish, but you'll see the point. So, turtle bottle stopper, you need the wood blank, pre-drilled with a proper size hole. I bought the Penn State bottle stopper jig. This part fits in the chuck. This part is threaded the same as the bottle stopper cones themselves are threaded, and that is your diameter for the bottle cone, for their bottle cones. All right, so it's all in one. It works real nice. You can turn them between centers, you can calipers. You can turn bottle stoppers any way you want. You don't need the bottle cones. They make all different kinds. But I chose, because I bought about 50 of these on sale. This is Penn State's standard everyday chrome stopper, and it has this threaded insert. Those are coarse wood threads. They'll fit down inside here when I'm done, and they match the threads on the jig. And this end is a finer thread that fits inside the cone itself, so when you get done, you just take this whole thing and screw it in. And one thing to remember, if you do this, you screw it in, and you say, oops, I need to take this out because I forgot to put finish on the bottom side. You put it in there, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to have that still stuck in the wood. So you get your vice grips and put on here and back it out, and guess what happens to those threads? So you need to think about it a little bit, or you just throw it away and start again. And you all know how I know that. So we're going to turn a quick bottle stopper. This is a Nova chuck. It turns backwards. I always have to remember that. And I hope it runs true. That's a Nova chuck with the wrong. I may have to talk my way through this one.
Yeah, I don't think they have pin jaws, so.
Yeah, will it fit one of those Jacobs chucks
It might.
up there in the top?
The biggest one.
They should all be the same size.
See, if you guys just get us a one-way as a demo up here, we wouldn't have to worry about this. Now, does that happen in what?
I've never used Penn State
Yeah,
stuff.
do that.
Billy to
Lots
the
of
rescue.
manual, so-
Really to the rest. The funny thing about a one-way is the tailstock is the number 3 more stable.
Just be careful with that in the headstock, it'll fall
Right.
out if you've never done that.
No, I'm gonna keep everything trapped.
Okay.
I love woodchucks. I have 7 of them. I don't know how many I actually use. If you get the G2 or the G3, whatever it's called, they have a wrench on, they work much better. All right. So you drill a whatever proper size hole. This happens to be 5/32, something like that. I forget the right diameter, but it's for this one. You just need to use the right diameter drill that's smaller than the threads, but bigger than the shank of the screw. There are expansion chucks, there are collet chucks, all kinds of ways you can do these. I made my first bottle stoppers like Nick Cook does by drilling 3/8 dowel, drilling that into the wood blank, and using the dowel to hold it in the Jacobs chuck. But I like this one better. All right. I heard a guy talk at a recent demonstration about the spindle lock, and he said he never uses it because he's always doing this. He never uses that. He'll turn a little bit, and he'll do this, and turn a little bit, because these things will indeed work their way backwards. And depending upon the lathe, the tailstock could slide back if you don't have a good grip. I think we're okay with this one. Now with this thing totally captured, I'm not as worried about starting off on a high speed, but you notice the first thing is I grab and turn the speed down before I have a chance to make a mistake. I'm going to turn this at a very high speed, because it is captured. And because it's plywood, it's got the square edges, I'm going to start with my face shield, and then once I get it around, I'll take that off. So what's the tool you use? It's done the roughing out, right? So we'll try batting in the screw. So you know how to tell when it's round, right? You put your tool on top and see if it bounces. That's right, that's not round. That's round, they're relatively round. That's a good way to do it without having to start and stop the lathe all the time. Now, you see the bend in that? That was one of the first real tools I ever bought besides the crap that you buy at Harbor Freight places. I was turning a 20-inch diameter oak burl bowl. This was called a roughing gouge. So I put that 20-inch on my Craftsman lathe, and it just beat the snot out of me. I wound up with bursitis on my right shoulder. It broke the 1-inch post on my tool rest, and that's all it did with this little bowl. I'm amazed it didn't do worse than that. But that's where that gun came from. It still works. I don't rough out bowls. That's why we now AEW's put a big push and call these spindle roughing gouges, not roughing gouges. Right, so the other way is with your favorite skew. You have a favorite skew? Everybody has a favorite skew. It's the one that's in the closet you never use.
I use mine with it, sharpness it.
I like the skew. Now, one good thing about the skew is you raise your tool rest. You don't want to be cutting like this. You'd almost like to be not quite horizontal, but sort of over the top. blocker will be done long before now, but I'm not in it. All right, so just two ways to do it. You start seeing a little bit of the color starting to show up in this thing. So the next thing I normally do is, what do I use? I forgot my other part. All right, I use the big bowl gouge. It's not a spindle gouge, but I like the bowl gouge. This collar right here is the right diameter for this piece on the bottom. I got to decide on the shape. I'm going to make this just a simple flame shape with a little ring at the bottom. So I want to get this piece right here down to the right diameter first, and that'll set the diameter of the rest of it. Now I can get rid of this. Again, I'm still captured. I don't have the sharp corners. I'm going to be getting shavings now instead of the big chunks of wood flying off, so I feel safe with just the glasses. I'm not going to take it the exact diameter because I still got some sanding to do. I need to save myself a little bit of room. But you can see right now, I guess you can see, and on the end, this diameter, this part right here is way too fat for a bottle cone with that size part that fits in the bottle itself. So I'm just start hogging it straight away until I feel I've got the diameter up here, the maximum diameter, about right. I think that's pretty close. So now I'm going to get rid of all the wood to make that a cylinder. I'm only using this tool because I'm trying to protect the good edge of my skew so I can finish cutting it out. Now you can see I'm not getting shavings, I'm getting chips and they're hitting me in the face. But I told you this wood is very soft, so it's not, I'm not feeling the pain in my face. So with this wood, I don't have to worry about it. That wood right there wouldn't do it. That wood is a lot harder and denser, and it's got a harder glue on it. Alright, so I've got all the wood out of the way. I'm going to change to my detail gouge. I'm going to start working on the collar and the base shape. What I wanted to do very simple. Very simple shape like that. Now I gotta go to my key. Still pretty fat, isn't it? Good thing about a spindle roughing gouge is it does have a flat section on the end. You can use that like a skew. You can use it like a parting tool to size the diameter and cut out wood really quick. I like to use it as a skew when I'm shaping this in. So I roll the tool. That's the roughing position. That's the finishing position. So I'm cutting right along that edge right there. I don't know if it shows on the camera or not. I can rough it this way and then throw my skew with the delicate finish touch. That screw. I don't like that screw. not turning bottle stoppers. But one of the problems I heard when I was doing a lot of these is they made them too tall. They wouldn't fit inside people's refrigerators, or if they put them on top of the fridge, after it's open, I don't have that problem. I don't have any open bottles of wine at my house. So I can make them this tall if I want to. It's only like it sits on the counter. If you make them too tall, they don't fit in a lot. So think about that when you make them. You don't want to make them little short squatty things, although I have the balls. So I'm going to make this one shorter. I don't have to use all the wood. It's expensive, but I'd rather make the right size than use all the wood and have somebody up there. I've seen people use a skew like this. I'll screw it up in a minute, trying to scrape with a skew. All right, final detail. I use so many tools because I own 3 times as many. I'm just in the habit of changing tools all the time. I could probably do it all with 2. It's not as much fun. So I use the heel of the skew to shape that piece. I don't really need to sand that, except that this is pretty coarse grained plywood. But by using the skew to make those final cuts, I can start with probably 220 grit sandpaper. So I use the heel of the skew to come over around it. Now I'm using the point to get down in this crack and make it a sharp point. Okay. Now I feel this right here is really rough. Let's see what it looks like. Well, you can't really see it, but on the very outermost part of the grain, that's where you get the most tear out. So I could probably go back over this with a skew again and polish the wood, but I'm just going to sand that piece right there. This is nice and smooth because as the skew went down, the back edge of the skew was polishing the wood. So this is nice and smooth. I don't need to sand that, but probably 320. Right here I'll probably go to 220 because there was no polishing to it. And I think the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make that a little thinner and I'm going to put a little ball on top of it. We'll see how the ball turns out.
You got half an hour. Half an hour.
Okay. All right, Ed tells me I have to show off a little bit, shut up. Or preferably just shut up. I'm not good at freehand beads, so that's what the top is. So I've got the shape, as you see. Yeah. So I've got the profile, this patent subject, I got the profile, now all I need to do is do a little sanding and part it off. I won't do the seal glue trick, I'll just swing that. 240 for this piece. One bad thing about turning plywood is you don't see tool marks or scratches very well. The flashing of the different colors of ply camouflage things. So I guarantee you if I were to polish this to 400 or even higher, I'm going to see all kinds of defects that I wouldn't normally allow to get tested. And you all know I'd do a better finish than this one. That was 220. We'll quit with 3. Politicians. You guys know Mike Weinstein? Know who he is? Mike Weinstein himself is so desperate, he personally called my house yesterday. And said he was so tired of the negative campaign. Right on my breakfast bar was an anti-amputee propaganda negative. Not from Weinstein, but from one of his support groups. So, I didn't call him
Tell you
back.
that last week.
I didn't call him back. I got a bunch of them in my car seat right now. So normally I would, at this point, soak it with thin CA glue because this is soft, it'll scratch and dent very easily. And then I would let that harden to use my accelerator. I would spray it with accelerator and then I would come back and sand through all of that or skew through it. And maybe coat it again if I needed to harden it up.
What do you do about the smell of the CA glue and the burning of the oil? That's just me.
I have at home, sometimes I have to go and get my next door neighbor who's stronger than I am to take these things off. That means I drill the hole the right size. At home I have a dust collector that sits right here.
Got it.
And I have a fan and it blows the stuff away. By that time it's dispersed enough. Now I have the 3M Air Shield helmet. I've got to shorten the battery. The batteries are very expensive, so I haven't used it in a while. But usually the 3M Air Shield would do it because the air comes in from the back. Or your trend, they do the same thing, I believe.
So you don't tap that hole before.
No, no need to, if you get it over the right size. Well, you saw how hard it is to get off here.
Yeah.
Now, some woods are very soft, and you can run the threads doing that. But this is the same thread,
Yeah.
so
3,
I think it's a 3.
3 and 16.
So if I had the time and the strength, I could thread this all the way down on here, but you guys get the point if you want to pass that around. So feel how soft that wood is, so you got to do something to harden the finish. Now for the fun part. Which one? I'll try this one. And obviously I won't get this thing very far, but we'll get an idea of what it looks like.
So normally at home you ground those edges off on the plywood?
Well, no, I've already cut them with a bandsaw.
Okay.
So I just did this to hold it together so you can see how I started. I started like this, put on my bandsaw,
Oh, I see.
and now, yeah. I told you how stupid it was, but I'm not dumb. So now, and I just approximated the circle. You see, this just got me to something reasonable. That's just a piece of pine. I know that these plies are going to stay glued in, but I'm going to start between centers to trap this to make sure I don't break bond right there, and to make sure that soft pine doesn't split. It's just called a glue chuck. We did that a couple of months ago in different chucking methods. Not that far.
Is there, here, we'll see if one of you, I noticed there wasn't one. Is that too big? It's way too big for that.
Is that enough?
No. You had it sitting there. Yeah. That's it.
I'm going to start this between centers. And I'm going to form a tenon on the bottom to grab it with in a scroll chuck so that I can, and I'll shape the outside. Then I'll turn it around and scroll chuck like this so that I can hollow out the inside. But when I start out like this, that way I can form the tenon on the bottom. Let's see what this happens. Well, it's also not perfectly round off the bandsaw. So I'm not going to worry too much about getting perfectly round. Because I'm going to turn the speed down before I mount it. Now there's a technique, if you have a locking spindle, you can lock the spindle and rock it, and that'll help these teeth dig in a little bit. And you tighten a little bit more. It's also digging this end. So that'll help you set the teeth on these spur drives. So with this thing trapped, that should be plenty strong enough. Now I'm going to lock this spindle. I don't want anything moving on it. Lathe doesn't like that much pressure. Is it always that tight?
I have no idea. I don't use that lathe very much.
All right. Oh, look out. Okay, maybe it's just always like that. All right. This looks like a spindle, but it's not. It's a bowl, so I can't use my spindle roughing gouge. So I'll use my bowl gouge and my face sheet. Ma'am? That was just the soft pine, and you hear it chatters a good bit, but it cuts in there fairly easy with this. When I switch to the plywood, that's going to get about 4 times as hard to cut. This plywood on edge grain is very, very dense, and you're cutting the glue. I'm going to switch to the plywood now. See the difference? You see that dust flying everywhere? I guarantee at home you can see the dust books in that. I would have my dust collector back here, my in-room air filter like that one back there, and for this stuff, probably my breathing home because of the dust. Or at least that little paper man. So let's start looking at the difference. I don't know if you can see how sort of dull that grain pattern is in the plywood. That's just off the bandsaw. Right? There's no way we can get in here straight on, but it's very bland, very dull looking. I don't see any character or anything to it. But let me make a couple more cuts into it, and when you start seeing these bands right here, they're already starting to look a little different, right? Because I'm cutting at a slope across them, they're no longer just this wide, they're wider because you're at an angle. So it'll start to pick up a little bit of grain character down. already feel the tool getting dull. I'm pushing on it pretty hard. Can you see the grain tear out, the chips? And it's a fairly sharp tool, and I'm not using the finest tool I've got. I'd go back and sharpen it before I did any more of that. But if I go this way, that feels like a porcupine's back. If I go this way, it's smooth. So even plywood on edge has a grain to it, and you can get grain tear out. So I'm going to expedite it. When you talk about grain tear out, can you see that? All right, and that's just the pine with a hogging cut on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to real quick put a tenon on it, reverse it, and show you what the inside and outside look like real quick, and we'll be done. I normally do this my harding tool when I do bring it in. What time is it there? 4 All right, you all know about tenons, and the tenons should fit the chuck and dovetail. This NEFWA chuck has dovetail jaws. You don't want the bottom of the tenon to bottom out of the jaws, because then it would wobble. So I've got my tenon formed, so now I'll put a rough shape on this, and then we'll go to the inside. Things we do to teach you guys. This is tough. Can I do dyeing next time, man? Stain or something?
I use those nice heavy metal dyes though.
All right, very coarse, very rough surface. So I'm going to give it just a minute. I'm going to skew. I'm going to shear cut with the edge of my bowl gouge and see if I can finish up that surface any better. That's better. But what I need to do is go to the grinder and sharpen this tool or get another one freshly ground. But I think we can sort of get the idea. Turn on the overhead, let's see what that grain is. It's not a very good picture. It's cleaning up, and what I see are consistent bands of dark, light ply, lighter colored core ply, light ply, and then dark. So this is the one I did with the same grain pattern all the way through, nothing changed. You can see how sort of bland a pattern that is. If I had mixed them up, what I don't see is I wanted to see if there's any difference. If I took one sheet of plywood this way and the next one this way, and because the plywood is already alternating grain, I do see a little bit of difference between this ply core and the core of this one, because the cores are in opposite directions. So one core I'm going in grain cutting at this point. The next core over, I'm cutting side grain. So I do see a little bit of difference in smoothness of the core grain. The rest of them I don't really notice. So that would be something I wouldn't want to repeat again, unless I wanted a consistent character. Tool is very dull. Very, oh my God, it is. All right, so we'll turn around, we'll see what it looks like on the inside. The technique is different on the inside as well. This one, I don't want to take any chances of anything sliding because I will not be captured for the whole turn this way. No woodchuck down, no returns the way. See if that's. Well, it's fully seated, so I guess it would be the difference between that spur drive and the Nova Chuck jaws somehow. So you have to live with that. I'm not going to turn it thin anyway, so you never notice. So don't blame it. This day decide to go on display quicker than I intended. Pass this around quick. All right, so the first thing you always do is you face off the piece. You get this face flat and smooth and level. It's wobbling a little bit. Now, with plywood, if you do that, if the plies are at an angle, I'm going to grossly exaggerate, when you trim this edge flat, you're going to cut thin slices thick, thin, thick, so you'll see it. Maybe good, maybe bad, it's just the way it is for the demonstration. that on this end, you see, if you switch that camera. Oops, okay. You see how the grains, I haven't cut all the way through this ply, but I've cut, over here, I've cut all the way through here. So on this rim, you see a little bit of difference. If that was a problem, when you got done, you could hand sand, because you wouldn't see a little bit of difference on it because it's not much. So you could camouflage that, or you could accentuate it. All right, so let's see if we can get this baby to hollow. As always, I go this way, certainly with plywood. I don't want to do a full cut inside and out because I'm pushing against the grain of the plywood. I want to shear the wood. It's already porcelain as it is. So hollow plywood, I'm certainly not going to use a scraper, and I'm not going to do a full cut like I'm going to do with softer woods. Start here and work my way in. Now I'm going to finish it and sand it. Can you see in the camera how it's cutting through the dark layers? It looks pretty cool when you're cutting. I'm going to cut through the top of the layer. So dull, and was barely able to cut it. But I'll give you an idea of what you can do with the stripes. Now, imagine if that were the bottom of the bowl and it had gone all the way down and you have a lot more layers of this. That gives you sort of a funnel look with all those stripes. Alternating layers gives you a different look. If you turn the plywood at an angle, 45 degrees, I saw that in, maybe it was Woodturning magazine this month, or last month. The guy stacked all his plies like this, sort of like I had the little piece of color ply. And that was really cool effect on the inside. If I had done this vertical grain and poured them this way, these would be vertical stripes instead of horizontal. I think that would have better character in this bowl. I think a bowl with vertical grain is better than horizontal grain. But I'll take a little more of this out and see if I can get a Now you're starting to see a little more what it would look like if I were to go all the way to depth. If you have the strength and stamina and you keep sharpening your tools and make these really deep, that gets really, really interesting inside. Stack the layers a little bit of an angle. You can sawtooth them. You can do a herringbone, glue them up and cut them into sections and rotate the sections, and you guys seen all that. There's just endless possibilities with plywood, and it's dimensionally stable. It is dry. It's not going to move on you. When I get done, no matter how thin I turn this, it's not going to, well, it won't warp enough for you to even notice the difference. You just have to use really, really sharp tools. Keep going back to the grinder and play with the layers. The good thing about this is plywood didn't cost me anything. I got it from my friend Dave Engdahl. You can go to Home Depot or Lowe's, buy it out of their stocks. And sometimes if you find a damaged sheet of plywood, they'll sell it to you really cheap. So you find some of the blemish, they can't sell a 4x8 with a blemish in it. So sometimes the guys give you away deals. To sand and finish, you're going to have to determine this, whether or not it's, this is soft plywood. If I started with 80 grit, I'd never get all the scratches out of it. And I would hit the glue, and bounce over the glue, hit the soft pine or fir, and dig deep, hit the glue, so you're gonna have a wavy surface if you start with 80 or 120 grit. So you have to work on your tool control enough to get this where you can start sanding with probably 160 or 220, something like that, if you can do that. If not, use a power sander. And I brought mine because the power sander with this, it uses a firm disc, it'll jump over some of those things a little more. Because these things really look crappy if you have ridges on them. So, you know, I finished the bottle stopper. Obviously didn't have time to do this. So I just want to give you an idea of how quickly the tool's gone. How many of you guys have sharpened a tool as often as I would have had to on this stuff? Even with my own turning, even with hardwood, I don't need to sharpen nearly that often. I don't go more than 5 minutes at home without sharpening, but turning plywood, probably about every minute and a half, you need to be hitting the edge with something. So it's a lot of work, but if you go online and look at Bob Stockdale's work and look at Stephen Gleasner's work, you'll see just what you can do with plywood. Now, I'm a hack, I haven't turned enough stuff to get my design down at all, but look at what those guys do, especially Gleasner. Any questions? Get out of here.
Okay. The challenge is to turn something that has at least 2 pieces of wood glue.